trip down there to install a brand new telescope. Once again, a humongous telescope. This one's 17 inches in diameter. It's about 430 mil in new money. And it is going to knock your socks off when you see the live views from this new telescope. And it's going to be launching over the coming weeks. We've also we're watching these fabulous feeds, live feeds from the Middle East today. We're actually launching early in 2020 our new observatory in Sharjah, which is one of the Emirates of the United Arab Emirates, and we're going to have 2 huge telescopes over there as well. So we're really looking forward to that, because that's going to help members, certainly on the east coast of the US and also in Western Europe as well, because those telescopes will come on slightly earlier. So it's really easy to use Slooh. You control the telescopes, but what makes Slooh really different is that you can watch what everybody else is controlling the telescope to view. So we always think of it a little bit like a jukebox, that one person is controlling the telescope, but everybody's watching the live views. And that our community of members is global. It's absolutely huge. But not only is it huge, but the variety of people's interest. Some are just space enthusiasts. They would watch a TV documentary about space or astronomy, and they love just collecting images maybe from the live telescope feeds. But we've also got advanced amateur astronomers who do art astronomy, which is creating beautiful, beautiful astrophotographs from Slooh's telescopes, all the data that they gather up. We've also got a bunch who love doing a load of science. They track asteroids and comets, and I think they've made nearly 10,000 submissions to the Minor Planet Center because they've been monitoring near-Earth asteroids, these asteroids which pose a potential risk to Earth. So, there's a whole gamut. And it doesn't matter if you're absolutely brand new, or if you own your own telescope, or you're an advanced astronomer. There's a place for you to find your own little corner of our community. So if this is the first time you've found Slooh, then come along, join the community. You will not be disappointed. And don't forget, every day you'll be able to see the fabulous views through Slooh's solar telescope, which is also at the Institute of Astrophysics of the Canary Islands. But anyway, let's get back to today's event, this annular eclipse. Now, the annular phase has already finished in the Middle East. So we're seeing the moon, the black silhouette of the moon, slowly leave the sun. But that shadow is racing across the Indian Ocean, Indonesia, and is going to hit Singapore. Now, if we take a quick look at the Singapore feed, we'll see that there, the moon is slowly encroaching on the sun, further and further and further. So there we go. As we watch this feed, more and more of the sun is going to be covered. So Bob Berman, he disappeared on me, but let's welcome back Slooh astronomer. He's an incredible author. He wrote The Sun's Heartbeat. If you're interested in the sun, and if you're watching this, you probably are, read Bob's book called The Sun's Heartbeat. And Bob, you also write for Astronomy Magazine and the Old Farmer's Almanac. Is that correct?
Yep, yeah, quite right. I'm the astronomy editor of the Old Farmer's Almanac. I have been for, more than a quarter century
Too many
now.
years.
And I'm a contributing editor and a longtime columnist with Astronomy Magazine. I was with Discover for 17 years before that. So all of this stuff is really kind of a monument to inertia.
And a lot of amateur astronomers will know you probably from your column in Astronomy Magazine.
That's
called
right.
Strange Universe.
That's right. Despite the fact that I'm just making all of this up as I go along.
Never. But you also run the Strange Universe Club at Slooh, and we're going to be getting you back to doing your weekly audio shows where you're commentating on whatever members are controlling the telescopes to see, but also if members can listen to you every night, because you've recorded some audio descriptions of some of the most popular objects in the Slooh 1000 catalogue. So people are listening to your wonderful dulcet tones and your audio descriptions when they're watching the live feeds coming in. through the Slooh's telescope. But anyway, Bob, back to the sun, our subject at hand. And you were talking earlier about seeing different layers of the sun. I think you mentioned the photosphere and the chromosphere, and you mentioned, several components and features. What more can you tell us on this subject about our local star?
Oh
Because I
yeah,
think
because
sometimes
it's
we
fast.
forget.
Yes,
Sure.
because obviously we only see the surface. We don't have X-ray vision, and starting in 1610, we had the benefit of telescopes looking at the surface, so we could see spots and spicules and granulation and faculae, as they're called. We see prominences on the edge during total eclipses, and the beautiful, beautiful lacy patterns of the solar atmosphere called the corona. But what's causing it, what's underneath? And it's only in more recent years that we've had new techniques like helioseismology that measures the pulsations of the sun, because the sun is like a giant subwoofer. Its surface rapidly pulses up and down, and the way it moves tells us about what's underneath, just as the way the earth moves tells us about earthquake, not just formation, but also propagation through the earth. So through all of this, we've learned, and to me, the most fascinating thing, of course, is where does all that heat and light come from? And that's the solar core. So I want everyone to picture that if you could see the sun in the sky, not the place where it's giving off the light. That's what we're looking at. That's this yellow thing. That's the part that radiates all of the light and the heat. It's a very thin layer. It's only about 200 miles thick. So picture it just almost painted on like a shellac. Very, very, very thin layer is letting out the light and the heat. Where it's coming from is a spot in the center. It's only less than a 20th the size of the sun itself, called the core. And in the solar core, listen to this. There's the energy of 96 billion 1 megaton hydrogen bombs released every second. Every second, there's the power of 96 billion H bombs going off. And all of this unimaginable power radiates and tries to escape, has a hard time doing so because all of the bits of energy and even some solid particles, including particles that don't get stopped by anything, called neutrinos, as they're racing out, they encounter more solar stuff, because the sun weighs a lot, weighs the same as 333,000 Earths. So it takes a while before all of that reaches the photosphere, and that's where it actually gets released. So that's the thing that we see. So there's a lot going on under the surface, including apparently a conveyor belt that carries material from the equator poleward and in a kind of circular fashion, and the sunspots we see are just manifestations of that. So a lot is going on.
So Bob, you talked about some of these particles, and let's think about a photon being generated at the core of the sun. Aren't there some amazing statistics about how long its journey takes to actually reach that thin veneer that you're talking about, 200
yes,
miles
and
on the surface of the
you'll see different figures, Paul. A photon itself gets to the photosphere and gets released fairly quickly, but for other bits of material to squirm its way to the surface, you'll read 50,000 years, you'll read 1,000 years, you'll read several months. I found that the literature is so discordant about how long it really takes material to get from the core to the surface that I don't actually trust any of it, which is why I didn't quote anything. It takes, let's put it this way, it probably takes a while because there's a lot there. As I said, the sun weighs the same as 333,000 Earths, or I think, to put a figure on it, 10 to the, something like to the 33 power grams. So it's a hefty ball we've got there in the center of the solar system.
So however long this poor little photon takes to reach from the core where it's been generated to the surface is a long time. We don't know specifically how, but it's maybe thousands of years or whatever. But once it's released from the sun's pressure and gravity, it doesn't take long to then reach us, which is
No,
what
that is 8.5
these are doing
minutes.
now. 8.5
8.5
minutes. So
minutes
we're
to us.
seeing the sun at the moment as it was 8.5 minutes ago. Is that right?
That's right. And
So it's a
fortunately,
little
it
bit
doesn't
like a
change
time
that much.
machine.
So we don't have bad seats for the show. It's not like we're so far up in the balcony that we're seeing old news, because it doesn't change very much. I should also mention a new layer in the sun between the core and the photosphere that we've recently discovered, called the tachocline. And that's a boundary about 7/8 of the way from the sun's core to the edge. And at that boundary, the sun changes from rotating almost like a solid ball, which it does from the core all the way to almost the surface. And then there's the outer 1/7 of the sun or so, where everything is chaotic, where the sun rotates at a much faster speed, takes only about 25 days to rotate. The poles take closer to 30 days. All of this looks like it takes a few days longer because we're going around the sun in the same direction it's rotating. So from our perspective, it looks like sunspots take not 25 days, but more like 28 to go around the equator, and more like 35 to go around the poles. But that's because we're moving along in the same direction that the sun is spinning. So that gives us a false sense of how long it takes the sun to rotate.
We're so familiar with the sun. It sounds, almost cliche to say that, but this orb in the sky that we see every day, we're fortunate enough to have special telescopes that we can look at it in these wavelengths that we've been talking about. It's quite easy to forget, though, Bob, that the sun is a star, our local star. So how does it measure up in comparison to other stars that we've studied? Is it particularly special? Is it run of the mill? Is it
No,
big,
it's
small?
pretty average. It's pretty average. Most stars are lighter weight than the sun and dimmer than the sun. So the sun is a little bit brighter than average. Only about 13% of the stars in our galaxy are like the sun. We say spectral class G. That indicates a white star. The sun is really pure white. I know some textbooks say that it's yellow. And from the surface of Earth here, look at the photograph. It certainly has a lemony yellow appearance, but in truth, it's a white star. Astronauts and high altitude balloonists, they all report that the sun is as white as snow. So why does it look yellow? It's interesting. This is fascinating. This may be the most fascinating fact. As the sunlight comes off the photosphere, and it consists of all the colors of the rainbow, as it tries to get to us, it has to pass through our air. And the quality of our atmosphere is such, the size of our air's atoms and molecules are such that the shorter wavelengths of light, the blue, get scattered, get bounced in all sorts of different directions, 6 times more readily than the red does. So because of that, we have a sky that looks blue. We get the blue sky, not for free. That blue light had to come from somewhere. So that blue light that gives us the blue sky was robbed, subtracted from the sun's light that was en route to us. So what we see when we look at the sun, like now in this image, or any day that we look up at it, is the sun missing a bunch of its blue light that went into giving us the blue sky. Another way of saying that is that the green and the red part of the spectrum, there's only 3 primary colors of light: red, blue, and green. So with the blue scattered out, we have an abundance, an overabundance of red and green. And it's a fact that red and green light, when combined, produce yellow. So the sun appears yellow because there's extra red and green coming to our eyes, because the blue is missing, because it's been taken out to give us our blue sky. So because of that, we have an appearance of a yellow star. But as astronauts tell us, the sun above our atmosphere, the true color of our star, the sun, is really as white as snow. And you can prove that now that it's winter time in the northern hemisphere. The next time you have a snowy day, I'm urging everyone to just look at the snow on a clear day when there are no clouds in the sky, and you'll notice something amazing. The snow is lit up by the sun hitting it, the slightly yellowish sun, but the snow is also being illuminated by the blue sky. So what happens is that those colors recombine. The blue that originally was part of the sun, but now went into giving us our blue sky, bounces off the snow. And the yellowish sun, made of primarily the red and green light, that's all that was left of the sunlight, bounces off the snow. Those two colors recombine to restore the original colors of the sun. And so what I'm telling you is that the color of snow on a clear day is the true color of the sun that astronauts see.
Okay. So I love that fact, Bob. I had some new lenses put in actually to my eyes, and what I noticed there was they only do one eye at a time, and my white coffee mug through the eye that hadn't been done looked slightly yellow, slightly creamy, but through the new lens was totally white. So I'm sure things kind of change for individuals as well. But I thought suddenly I'm seeing things as nature actually is. My eyes were no longer affecting, kind of putting little filter glasses over. But
That's
Bob,
wonderful. So in your new eye, you're seeing the blue of the sky, much more richer blue, aren't you?
everything is a lot richer. So that's rather cool. But Bob, here we are. We're Science Centre Observatory in Singapore. If any of our thousands of viewers that we've got tonight, hi everybody, thank you for joining us. If anybody is ever on a stopover in Singapore, as I was, you need to check out the Singapore Science Centre. It is, and if you've got kids, I mean, I'm just a big kid still, always will be, but if you've got kids, take them along. It's one of the best interactive science centres I have ever visited anywhere in the world. I would say that it's almost worth a diversion if you are anywhere in that region, and Singapore's an absolutely splendid metropolis anyway to visit. But here we go. So we're still seeing in Singapore the moon edging its way towards covering the sun and that annularity. So Bob, anybody who's joined us a little bit later, could you do a little recap for us about the annular eclipse, what it is, why it's called the Ring of Fire, and why we're not seeing a total eclipse today?
Sure. Because the moon in its elliptical orbit around Earth keeps changing its distance. And now its average distance is about 238,000 miles from us. That's center to center, not surface to surface. But because it's not a circle, there are moons around certain planets that have circular orbits. Io, Europa, Ganymede, and even Callisto, the four main big moons of Jupiter, orbit in circular orbits. But most moons have ellipses, and so does ours. So it means the moon gets carried out further away and closer to us. So if it does pass in front of the sun, and you're in a position on Earth where it's going to pass centrally in front of the sun, if the moon happens at that day to be in the nearer half of its orbit, especially in the nearer 1/3 of its orbit, it will appear close enough and therefore large enough to fully cover the sun, and we'll have a total solar eclipse. But if it's in the farther away half of its orbit, it won't appear large enough. It'll just be too far away. And when the moon completely covers the sun, it will appear too small, and it'll leave behind a circle of looks like fire, a ring of fire around it, because it's just not big enough to do the job.
And we've already seen it once from one of our partners in the United Arab Emirates. We're going to see it again in Singapore. We have just, the studio, I've just brought this up because this is the partial eclipse that they're going to be witnessing at the Hong Kong Observatory. So the Hong Kong Observatory is working with a bunch of other partners in Hong Kong. I used to work in Hong Kong. That's an amazing city as well. But it's full of amateur astronomers, many of whom are members of Slooh, so they use the Slooh Solar Telescope and the nighttime telescopes. But these guys are not going to see the annular eclipse that Bob just mentioned because they're not within this thin, it's normally about 70 to 100 miles wide, this thin path of annularity. They're outside of that. So they're only going to see a partial solar eclipse.
And which is pretty amazing by itself. We were talking about that earlier, that all you have to do is go 100 miles or so in one direction or another, and you're no longer lined up correctly to see the moon cover the sun. In other words, the moon is so close to Earth relative to its size that all you have to do is travel a few hundred miles and you're off at an angle. And what's behind the moon then is not the sun. You're seeing it from one angle or from another angle, and instead you're seeing a different part of the sun behind it, not the full sun, but only a little corner. Look at it right here. You've missed the three-dimensional perfect lineup, and instead you're just seeing a little part of the sun being blocked by the moon. So it's quite amazing that the moon is that close to Earth, that just traveling over the surface of our planet is enough to change the direction towards the moon enough. It's called parallax, so that you no longer get the lineup of the Earth, the moon, and the sun.
Absolutely. Bob, when we come back, we're going to take a short break now, but when we come back, we'll talk about total solar eclipses. And we mentioned earlier on in the show that a total solar eclipse, you told me this very early on when we first did one of our first eclipse shows, and you were trying to explain to me that a total solar eclipse is not like any other type of eclipse, even a 99.99% partial eclipse. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, because we've got some opportunities coming up next year and over the coming years for people to see a total solar eclipse. And I know we're both great advocates for people to see this, because they really are amazing events. But I think my second favorite after today's event is definitely an annular eclipse. And we've still got that opportunity to see the annular eclipse when it reaches Singapore. We've already seen it in the United Arab Emirates. So anyway, we are going to be right back after this very short break. So don't go anywhere. Come back and we'll give you some good tips about total solar eclipse watching. Bye for now.
Hello viewers, welcome to Tuning with CGTN New Media. So if you are planning to spend Christmas in the Eastern Hemisphere, then you have a celestial treat to look forward to the next day, as the new moon eclipses the sun in an annular event or ring of fire solar eclipse on Wednesday, today, December the 26th. If you are outside the path of visibility for this eclipse, you're always welcome to stay with us with CGTN New Media. So in 2019, sky watchers in a few selected locations on Earth have had two opportunities to see a solar eclipse. So this is also we broadcast to you. If you watch CGTN New Media live stream, we brought to you from Beijing at the very beginning of 2019. That's the partial solar eclipse on January 2019, that's on January the 6th. And talk about the second solar eclipse, that's a total solar eclipse, occurred on July 2nd, 2019, and that was visible almost exclusively over South America. So that also happened to be a totality. So that's basically cover the area, the Southern Pacific Ocean, east of New Zealand, and also in Chile as well. So that's basically the two solar eclipses happened this year in 2019. And today, that's the third and the final solar eclipse of 2019 that occur over Asia, Africa, and Australia on December the 26th, 2019. And it will be an annular, or we call it ring of fire solar eclipse. So this one will cover over Saudi Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia. and it will also appear as a partial eclipse over Asia and Australia. So if our viewers, you're from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, India, Sumatra, Borneo, Guam, and the Philippines, you have the opportunity to see the Ring of Fire eclipse. And if our sky watchers in other parts of Asia, Australia, and Africa will be able to see a partial eclipse. So during this eclipse, the moon will cross directly in front of the sun for viewers along the center line of its path. However, because the eclipse occurs just a few days after the moon reaches apogee, which is the farthest distance from the Earth, its appear size is smaller than the sun.
Of the USA, so it's still Christmas Day evening for them, I believe. In fact, yeah, it's 11:30, I think, for them at night. And our special guest, Bob Berman, astronomy author, you've got to read some of his books, and you have to read his articles, his column in Astronomy magazine, is set to join us again. Bob, are you there? Now, what do you make of this feed? I mean, the International Astronomical Centre in Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates have given us this absolutely spectacular feed. When we began the show, the sun was just rising above the horizon. What do you make of our live streams tonight? Mm. And these guys, especially for us, they've relocated from their normal observatory, which is in the city of Madinat Zayed, so that they're in the path of annularity. So a huge thanks to them, and the clarity of their image stream has been absolutely spectacular. So we're going to watch this, the end of the partial solar eclipse phase. We've already seen the annular at this location, but we've also got our feed in Singapore at the Science Centre Observatory there. And we're heading into the annular phase, probably. In fact, if we hop over to that, Bob, you were talking about the motion of the moon and how fast it moves its own diameter. We can probably make a little bit of an assessment here visually, if we can get that up, studio, as to how long it's going to be. I reckon it's going to be about half an hour.
Let's take a look at that image from coming in from Singapore, and it's easy to figure out because the moon again moves its own width per hour. So whenever you see the moon in a position of any sort, just figure it's going to be one moon width moving over in an hour. Now, what direction depends upon where you are on Earth, because our friends in the southern hemisphere are upside down from us. So we see the moon commonly, we being people in Europe and the United States, will see the moon at midday passing from essentially
oh, there we go.
Right to left. There we go. Oh, this is good. But in other parts of the world, we see it at different angles in its motion, and that just depends on where you are on the planet.
So, Bob, I would say that's nearly halfway across the sun. Would you say that's about right? So we'd be talking about 35 minutes, something like that, for annularity?
Yes, I agree with you, yes.
Okay, so we're going to be on air on this hosted section of the show for another 25 minutes till the top of the hour, but the studio in Connecticut can keep this feed online for you so that you can watch annularity from Singapore. But now Bob and I are going to talk about a few things. We're first of all going to tell you about a total solar eclipse and what makes that so special. Bob, I said before the break, this was one of the first things that you tried to explain to me. I didn't get it when you explained it to me. I couldn't understand why a total solar eclipse could be so much different to a 99.9999% partial solar eclipse. But as soon as I witnessed one for myself, I got it. And as you know, the Slooh team think it's quite amusing because I have not witnessed a total solar eclipse yet, which has not brought a tear to my eye. I find them the most profoundly awe-inspiring event I have ever witnessed. So what can you tell us about the different?
Well, that's the thing. To tell anybody is sort of like trying to tell someone what it's like to fall in love, or to tell someone what it's like to the first time you've swum in tropical waters off Hawaii, where when the water is just that perfect temperature. Something that you have to do or see, experience for yourself. And I think it defies logic because, okay, logically, you'd say there's the moon lined up with the sun in the sky, perfectly covering it. And yes, some stars come out during the day. And yes, you do see the sun's atmosphere. And it's also true that geysers of flame, pink geysers, shoot up from the edge of the sun into space. And it may sound quite lovely, and it is. But the actual experience, somehow, for reasons that I cannot explain, transcend it. And it becomes an event that animals go crazy, people weep. I find that at least half of all people who go to a total solar eclipse are weeping from it, they're overwhelmed by the experience. And I think if you were blind, you'd know it was happening. There is just something that happens. You know, I live not too far from Woodstock, so maybe that's why I use terms like the vibe of it. You have to experience the vibe of it, man. But there is just a feeling that comes when the sun and the moon and your spot on Earth form a straight line in space that you have to experience to believe, because it is overwhelming. It transcends any other, I think, earthly experience. And we've all seen beautiful things. Rainbows are beautiful. The Grand Canyon is beautiful. We mentioned some other celestial sights, an exploding meteor, the Aurora Borealis. All of these are wondrous sights. But for some reason, nothing can equal a total solar eclipse.
No, and it's everything else which is going on around you, as you say. It's one of my favorite segments that we did was on our transcontinental eclipse expedition, and we stopped off at a zoo, and I walked around with the keepers, and they had this huge program where they had webcams set up for all of their animal enclosures, and they were asking the public to monitor the animals, and we went live to those cameras during the eclipse, and they were going to, you could see they were disturbed. They started running around the field, and then they got very subdued. And it was the same thing for the humans that were around me. You see this shadow, the moon's shadow, approaching on the horizon, and it's alien. Everything about it is alien and outside of our normal comprehension. And I think that's what I've been trying to understand, what makes it so profoundly astounding to watch. And I just have this feeling that it's everything isn't right. Your brain has not experienced these things, even the things that you're not really noticing, the strange shadows. Your brain is just going haywire. And that I'm pretty sure is what makes me overwhelmed when I witness that.
That may be part of it. Also, the unfolding of the event may also do something, Paul, because normally astronomy is like looking at a photograph or a slide. It's unmoving. The Orion Nebula, as beautiful as it is, will not look any different 1,000 years from now. And the great globular clusters that we see in the wonderful Slooh telescopes they take the breath away, but they will look no different in 1 hour and in one lifetime from now. But here you actually see the moon transgressing on the sun's photosphere, and you actually see it covering up that last bit of sun and producing the diamond ring effect. And there's actually a grand epic motion of the solar system. We're seeing the moon in its orbit doing things and producing this spectacle. And it's unlike what astronomy normally is like. It's so, without belaboring it, and I've been raving and ranting about this for probably half a century, this is why we urge people to see it for themselves. Yes, of course, we want you to come to Slooh and share these eclipses with us, because most of the time you can't be there. You're not going to be able to be in Patagonia probably this December 14th for the next eclipse, and most of our viewers and listeners will not be in Antarctica on December 4th, 2021 for the eclipse after that. So yes, sure, join us here and you'll see many of the phenomena. But if you can go, if you can travel, if you can afford it, the time or the money, please do so. See it at least once in your life. See a total solar eclipse for yourself.
It should certainly be on everybody's bucket list, and worth, you know, spending the money and saving up for it. It's not like you don't know when these things are going to happen. So there's plenty of time to plan. But we're talking about that as being probably the most awe-inspiring celestial event, which I love. We've been very fortunate this year. We saw a transit of Mercury where we were seeing views like this, but with the tiny planet Mercury transiting across the face of the sun. What are the other kind of spectacles, celestial spectacles that people can see both with their own naked eye out in their backyards, but also using Slooh's big telescopes as well?
Okay, let's do it the way you've segregated it just now. The spectacles that require no equipment, that you can just see with the unaided eye, and the spectacles that are the best that you could see through a good telescope, like the Slooh's telescope. Naked eye, we've already established, nothing approaches a total solar eclipse, not a total lunar eclipse. That's not even in the same ballpark. Not a partial solar eclipse, nothing else. It has to be all those words and no others. Total solar eclipse. What's second? Probably a great display of the aurora borealis, the northern lights, a really fine display like the one you saw, Paul, that covers much of the sky. A bright one has motion to it. It can light up the ground under your feet. I'd say that's probably number two. Now, number three for a naked eye spectacle, I'd be torn between an exploding meteor, they're called a bolide, or a very brilliant meteor that casts shadows, that's called a fireball, or a great comet. Once every 15 years, on average, we get a great comet, and that adjective is not just it's not a casual, informal way of saying it, like, oh, look at that great comet. It's actually the term for a comet bright enough to be seen over cities, even bulldozing its way through light pollution. And we get a great comet. People may remember Hale-Bopp that we had in the 1990s, and Yakutaki a year from then. There's two great comets in 1996 and 1997. We haven't had one in the Northern Hemisphere since then. But on average, once every 15 years, we get a great comet. So those are them, a great comet, a brilliant meteor, or a very rich meteor shower. And we don't get those very often. You've got good weather for it. And those are probably the greatest spectacles, globular clusters of the planet Saturn. And then after that, the Jupiter doesn't disappoint.
My particular favorite.
It's your favorite and my wife's too, by the way. And the moon, you'd think, oh, come on, the moon is so, I know mundane is the wrong word, but you know what I mean. So common. What aren't you wasting a really great telescope on the moon? No, because the shadowing changes from hour to hour and night to night, and there's all these amazing craters and details and mountain ranges. It's spectacular. I'm not tired of the moon after watching it.
Well, you've rediscovered it, haven't you, Bob? You were telling me a short while ago that you bought a new telescope, and it's reinvigorated your enthusiasm
It
for
has.
lunar observing. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, it's true. I had it's right here. It was I don't know if this is going to show up
Yeah, we
at
can see that.
all,
It's a
but it's
drawing of a crater.
it's a sketch I made at the eyepiece when I was 15 years old of the crater Copernicus, and it just shows that that I love the moon then, and as
Then
you
and
say,
now.
rediscovered it, love it just as much now. You never get tired of it. So yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot of
But as
amazing
you
things out
say,
there.
the moon, a little bit like the sun in so many ways, is such a familiar object. It's often neglected by amateur astronomers, and it can be, the curse of a lot of Slooh members who are trying to track down faint and fuzzy objects like galaxies and nebulae and those globular clusters, because the bright moonlight actually adds quite a lot of noise to the images. So this actually at new moon today, in fact, new moon is roughly around now,
Yes.
is an absolutely perfect time for a lot of them, and the rest of the time they're absolutely
And since
cursing
you
the moon.
mentioned galaxies and nebulae, with a big
Mm.
enough telescope, and here's where the Slooh telescopes come in, the ability to gather light for several
Mm.
minutes and then process it correctly and even overcome a little bit of light pollution, although the Slooh telescopes are located where there is little or no light pollution. Yes, then you get into the then galaxies themselves, a beautiful spiral galaxy showing those cobalt blue baby stars, and the cores of spiral galaxies often have these campfire yellow cores at the center of them, and the beautiful spiral arms. Yeah, we can't neglect that.
And we've got several members who actually monitor galaxies, and you'll often see them setting up their missions, which is controlling the telescopes. So we must keep an eye on this live feed and catch the moment that the moon leaves the face of the sun. But they often set up their missions either very early in the evening or very late at night. And the reason why they do that is that they can observe galaxies which are just setting at dusk or just rising at dawn, where the professional surveys can't point. And these guys, and there's guys and girls doing it, so I use it kind of pejoratively, they are searching for novae and supernovae. What are they, Bob, when we're talking about stars? Because we're looking at our local star now. What's a nova? What's a supernova?
Well, yes, a supernova. Uh, there's two types. The type one happens in a double star system when material from one star, usually a very massive star, uh, accretes on its white dwarf neighbor until enough material falls on the surface to actually ignite and blow up. And a type 2 supernova happens when the star itself doesn't need a companion to blow up. In its old age, it just cannot support the weight of its outer layers, so it collapses on itself until the core is impinged on, and then there's a rebound reflective effect, and the whole star produces energy by an entire new method that it didn't during its normal lifespan. So the brightness of a supernova can equal the light of the entire billion, 100 billion
Yeah.
stars of the galaxy that it's from. And so these people are very wise to look for supernovae in other galaxies, because typically one will go off one per century per galaxy. So that's a long wait. But if you're looking at a lot of galaxies, if you're spending each night looking at 100 galaxies, well, now you've upped the odds, and you really might be the first
Yeah.
to find a new
Now,
supernova.
we've got members then who have discovered supernova with Slooh's telescopes. They've discovered nova with Slooh's telescopes. They've discovered asteroids. What we're missing, Bob, is one of the discoveries I always think is probably the most important to a lot of amateur astronomers, and that would be a comet. And they're a special discovery because they're about the only discovery you can make which are still named after the discoverer, aren't they?
Yeah, it's the last one. You won't be
So
able to
it's a
find a new galaxy, but if you ever did find a new galaxy, nobody was ever going to call it Bill or Jim. But find a new comet like Borisov, the one that's coming through the solar system now, and it'll bear your name forever. So, yep, that's your last chance for immortality.
So just as we're watching the moon just leaving now the face of the sun in the United Arab Emirates, and this glorious feed that the guys down at the International Astronomical Centre in Abu Dhabi have set up for us today. Just as we look at that, you were talking about a supernovae in our galaxy, and there is the remnant of one, isn't there, that a lot of Slooh members love to capture using Slooh's telescope, Bob. It's Messier 1. What's that one about?
Oh yes, well, the first object on Charles Messier's list, first seen in 1764, excuse me, was originally a star that blew up on the 4th of July in the year 1054, and it was as bright as the planet Venus appears. It was really brilliant, cast shadows, could even
Tuning with CGTN New Media. We are right now bringing you the live of the Ring of Fire solar eclipse, and this is the third and the last eclipse of 2019. So if your viewers, you are in Asia, Africa, and Australia on December 26 local time, you will be seeing this annular Ring of Fire solar eclipse. For viewers, you are not in the path of visibility for this eclipse, please tune in with CGTN. We will bring you the whole process. We talk about the December's eclipse. This is the Ring of Fire. And so for the visibility is actually covering the Saudi Arabia, Qatar, India, Sumatra, Borneo, Guam, and the Philippines. And the viewers, if you're in the other parts of Asia, Australia, and Africa, will be able to see a partial eclipse. So during this eclipse, the moon will cross directly in front of the sun for viewers along the center line of its path. However, because the eclipse occurs just a few days after the moon reaches apogee, which is farthest distance from Earth, its apparent size in the sky will be smaller than the sun. This means that it won't block the sun entirely, but it will instead turn the sun into a blazing ring of fire from the Earth's perspective. And the first location to see the annular eclipse is 137 miles or 220 kilometers northeast of the Saudi Arabia. It will begin there at 6:34 a.m. local time or 03:34 GMT, and the ring of fire phase will last 2 minutes and 59 seconds. Guam will be the last place on Earth to see the eclipse. The island will see the annular phase last for more than 3 minutes, but the sun will set before the partial phase of the eclipse has ended. And we talk about if our viewers in China, we had information that the Xiamen already saw the eclipse beginning at around 12:33 local time, and the eclipse will end in Xiamen at around 3 p.m. local time. So we talk about a solar eclipse actually that occur when the disk of the moon appears to cross in front of the disk of the sun. A transit of the moon across the face of the sun, commonly called a solar eclipse, can be a dramatic event for the viewers. But I would like to first give a warning to all the viewers: never look directly at the sun during an eclipse at any stage. Do not look directly at the sun because a severe sun damage can result. So we talk about the eclipse, and due to the variations in distance, not all eclipses are total. Every eclipse passes through a partial phase as the moon slowly moves across the sun. Even at the height of an eclipse, the moon may not completely cover the sun. So in case of a total solar eclipse, like the one that across the US on August 21st, 2017, occurs when the disk of the moon blocks 100% of the solar disk. The sun's light is blocked completely and the midday is replaced by an eerie gloom. When the moon completely obscures the sun, unique effects occur. The solar corona becomes visible. Animals and birds think that night has fallen, and the air temperature may drop. A partial eclipse occurs when the moon covers only part of the sun, and only part of the sun is covered by the moon. That's the partial eclipse, and that may continue to total or annular phases. An annular eclipse is a special kind of partial eclipse where the moon is slightly too far away from Earth to exactly cover the sun, and the edge of the sun is still visible all around. And we talk about today, actually, we will see the ring of fire. So if the moon passes directly in front of the sun when it is near apogee, the point in its orbit where it is farthest from Earth, sky watchers will see an annular eclipse, also known as a ring of fire. So the Earth, Moon, and other orbiting bodies of the solar system cast long shadows through space. When the moon's shadow falls onto the Earth, people on the ground see the sun obscured as the moon passes in front of it. So we talk about this year, 2019, we saw 3 solar eclipses. The one also broadcasted by CGTN at the very beginning of 2019, that's falling on the January 6, 2019. That's the first solar eclipse this year, and a second one that's basically exclusively for the South America region. That's the second, and also a total solar eclipse on July 2nd, 2019, and this is the third one, also the last one of 2019. So the December 26th solar eclipse, this one is going to be an annular solar eclipse. So as we know, the sun will not 100% be blocked, and we will see a little bit the edge of the sun. That's also, we call it the ring of fire. And according to different websites, as we know for our information, today's annular solar eclipse began at 9:23 p.m. local time, or EST, or the 0323 December 26 GMT as a partial solar eclipse, and then make its first peak as the ring of fire at 10:35 p.m. EST or 0334 GMT in Saudi Arabia. And the 88-mile or 142-kilometer visibility path of ring of fire will then move across Qatar, the UAE, Oman, India, Sri Lanka, Sumatra, Singapore, Borneo, the Philippines, and Guam, making it visible to potentially millions of sky watchers. So the webcasts like CGTN will also help and the viewers unable to make it to the Eastern Hemisphere. And we will bring you the whole path of the eclipse. And the eclipse ends December 26 at 03:05 a.m. EST or 08:05 GMT. So we talk about the ring effect. The ring effect of the annular solar eclipse will last the longest. For the viewers, if you're luckily in Indonesia island, then you will see the longest. That's around 3 minutes and 39.5 seconds. And observers, if you are across most of Asia, Northeast Africa, and the southern and western portions of Australia, will also catch a partial eclipse. So for North America, will not see any part of it. So only sky watchers in part of Europe, Asia, Australia, and Africa will be able to catch a glimpse of the display. So we will see right now the whole path of the Ring of Fire. This is the last one in 2019. We talk about although the new moon will pass directly across the face of the sun, it will not cover the sun's face entirely. That's because the moon is currently further than average from the earth. So its apparent size is 3% smaller than that of the sun. So because of that 3%, the sun will not be blocked 100%. That is, we call the ring of fire. The ring part actually is the edge of the sun. So the moon reached its perigee point, the point in its orbit when it's closest to the earth, on December 18th, but that was its most distant perigee of the year. At that time, it was 230,000 miles away from skywatchers, but when the eclipse rolls around, the moon will have reached to a distance of 238,700 miles from Earth. So that distance means that the tip of the moon's cone of darkest shadow, called the umbra, will miss reaching Earth's surface. As a consequence, the moon will not be able to completely cover the sun and produce the grand spectacle of a total solar eclipse. So we think about place a penny on top of a nickel. The penny represents the moon and the nickel represents the sun. A ring of silver remains visible around the penny's edge. So once again, I would like to give our viewers a warning. So looking directly at the sun, even during an annular eclipse, can lead to a blindness or other forms of permanent eye damage if you are not wearing proper eye protection. So to safely observe the sun or watch an eclipse, you need to special protective eyewear or eclipse glasses. Basic sunglasses, even with UV protection, will not sufficiently protect your eyes. So if you are planning to document the eclipse with any photo equipment, there are special solar filters you can add to make sure the remaining ring of sunlight does not take a toll on your vision. So I also saw our viewers posted photos of the eclipse, so make sure do not look directly at the sun. And the safest way to observe an eclipse is indirectly using a pinhole camera that you can make easier at home. If your viewers are so familiar with CGTN New Media, actually we made one the pinhole camera in our January 6th broadcast in Beijing. And that's a tiny solar image projected by the pinhole onto a shaded white piece of cardboard. So this is the safe way and also the easy way to look at the whole spectacle phenomenon. So if you must document one of these events, a small wide-angle snap should capture the moment, even if you are using your smartphone camera. So for our viewers, right, you're watching CGTN New Media live stream. So this is the only annual Ring of Fire solar eclipse in 2019. Just tuning in with CGTN will bring you live of the only annular Ring of Fire solar eclipse in 2019. Right now you are looking at the footage from Singapore. Very soon we believe that we will see the full eclipse. So basically start from partial eclipse. So we have look at that the touching begins, and then coming to the full eclipse, to the maximum eclipse, and the full eclipse ends, and then to the partial eclipse ends. The first place that's visible to see this Ring of Fire eclipse, it was Saudi Arabia, and the American territory of Guam will be the last place on Earth to see the eclipse. So the last solar eclipse of 2019, a so-called Ring of Fire eclipse, occurs Thursday, December 26th local time. Or if you're still on 25th, that's a Christmas gift to you. This, if your viewers luckily enough to see it in the Eastern Hemisphere, but if you don't live in a place where it's visible, do not worry, you can watch it live online with CGTN New Media. So we talk about very soon, we will see, this is the footage from Singapore. It's coming to the full eclipse. So the December 26th solar eclipse is an annular solar eclipse in which the moon does not completely cover the sun as it transits across the star's face. From the Earth, where the eclipse is visible, this leaves a brilliant ring of light around the moon, in which observers call a ring of fire. And the most important thing is be sure to wear a proper eye protection like eclipse glasses if you observe the eclipse in person. So this is the footage in Singapore. Very soon we will see the annular eclipse. So to our viewers, if you are in that visible path, which means you are in Saudi Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia, you will see the ring of fire. And it will appear as a partial eclipse over Asia and Australia. So for our viewers, if you're from North America, you will not see all this. But you can tune in with CGTN, you will see the whole process without a protective glasses. Across the whole North American continent in 2017. That's also the biggest one happened there, and we talk about this one is the last one in 2019. If you're just tuning in with CGTN New Media, right now you are watching the live shot in Singapore. Very soon we will witness this maximum solar eclipse, or we call it a ring of fire. We talk about the annular solar eclipse of December 26, 2019 is not quite a total solar eclipse. So this one looks like a ring of fire because the moon appears smaller in the sky than the disk of the sun, therefore blocking out the moon, blocking out the middle of the star with some of its body still appearing. As the moon orbits the Earth, it sometimes comes closer to the planet, so the nearest point is called perigee, or the far away. The further point is called apogee. The same phenomenon is what causes supermoons every so often. So this event will hit the Arabian Peninsula, travel across the northern part of Indian Ocean, and will pass through Indonesia. And the eclipse will peak at 05:17 GMT. I believe very soon we will see the peak eclipse. So once again, we talk about this is the last eclipse of 2019. So our viewers, I saw some questions. So we talk about this actually not really cover the whole globe. So the Ring of Fire eclipse on December 26 is visible from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, India, Sumatra, Borneo, Guam, and the Philippines. The sky watchers in other parts of Asia, Australia, and Africa will be able to see a partial eclipse. Of course, we also should depend on the different weather conditions, but we talk about the December's eclipse will be a ring of fire occur over Saudi Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia. So our viewers, if you cannot really see this in your country, then please stay with us with CGTN New Media. And once again, do not look directly at the sun. So you're right now watching the live picture in Singapore. So we talk about a solar eclipse occurs when the moon passes between Earth and the sun, thereby totally or partly obscuring the sun for viewers on Earth. So the annularity will be visible in Saudi Arabia, Qatar, UAE, Oman, Pakistan, India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Malaysia, Indonesia, Singapore, Northern Mariana Islands, and Guam. So the solar coronal magnetic fields play a key role in driving the space weather conditions. And such solar eclipse events present an outstanding opportunity for the scientists to constrain the theoretical methods via observations. For our viewers, this is the last solar eclipse of 2019. The central path of the 2019 annular eclipse passes through the Saudi Arabian Peninsula, southern India, Sumatra, Borneo, Philippines, and Guam. And it will also cover small parts of Eastern Europe. So right now you are looking at this is the live picture from Singapore. And talk about the December 26th eclipse. It begins in Saudi Arabia, about 220 kilometers northeast of Riyadh, and will end in Guam. So hello to all the viewers at Facebook and also at different platforms. Welcome to tuning in with CGTN. We are right now bringing you the live coverage. This is from Singapore. And right now it's reached the peak eclipse. So once again, this is what we call the Ring of Fire eclipse. And the ring effect of the annular solar eclipse will last the longest in Indonesia. So the solar eclipse are one of the cosmic wonders of our solar system. And here we go, our viewers. This is the Ring of Fire in Singapore. Here we go, if you can really capture the picture. And this is the live shot in Singapore. This is the Ring of Fire annular solar eclipse. We are waiting for this moment. Ring of Fire to raise the sun in last eclipse of 2019. This is a very spectacular scene. You are right now watching the live picture brought you by CGTN. This is the live shot in Singapore. Ring of Fire annular solar eclipse. So the new moon is passing directly across the face of the sun. It will not cover the sun face entirely. That's because the moon is currently further than average from the Earth. So its apparent size is 3% smaller than that of the sun. So you can see that the sun is not 100% covered. So we can see that the Ring of Fire basically is the edge of the sun. For our viewers, we just saw the Ring of Fire annular eclipse in Singapore. And also can consider as a Christmas gift to all our viewers if you're tuning in with CGT and New Media. So we talk about the annular eclipse is a special kind of partial eclipse where the moon is slightly too far away from Earth to exactly cover the sun. So the edge of the sun is still visible all around. So this is the ring of fire. So the geometry of the sun, moon, and the earth changes with every eclipse. The narrow path of the moon's shadow will wander to different places each time, but every point on Earth will have an opportunity to see a solar eclipse at some point in history. But once again, never look directly at the sun during an eclipse. Even this is an annular eclipse, do not look directly at the sun. So the ring effect of the annular solar eclipse will last around 3 minutes in different locations, but the longest one will be in Indonesia. And observers across most of Asia, northeastern Africa, and the northern and western portions of Australia will be able to catch a partial eclipse. So this will be the final eclipse of 2019, and unfortunately North America will not see any part of it. So only sky watchers in part of Europe, Asia, Australia, and Africa will be able to catch a glimpse of the display. So to our viewers, we just saw the ring of fire, annular solar eclipse in Singapore, and we talk about solar eclipse are one of the cosmic wonders of our solar system. So they occur when the new moon blocks part or all of the sun, as seen from the surface of the earth. For this case, for today, that is covered almost full of the sun, but because right now the moon is far from the earth, so we can see the size of the moon is 3% smaller. So that only cover the majority of the sun, but leave the edge of the sun visible. So we call that the ring of fire. So during a total solar eclipse, the path is known as the path of totality. In addition to total eclipse of the sun, the moon can block part of the sun's disk, or we call a partial solar eclipse, so which leaves only an outer ring of the sun visible. We call it the annular solar eclipse. So think about this, think in this way. You place a penny on top of a nickel. The penny represents the moon and the nickel represents the sun. So the ring of silver remains visible around the penny's edge. So we talk about this is the third and last solar eclipse in 2019. And we also will see a solar eclipse in 2020. So there is an annular solar eclipse of June 21st, 2020. As the ring of fire will first appear over the Republic of the Congo, across Africa, pass over Yemen and Oman, and keep going over parts of India and southern China. So that will happen on June 21st, 2020. And there's another solar eclipse, which is total solar eclipse, on December 14th, 2020. So South America will once again experience a total solar eclipse. The path of totality will pass over the southern corner of the continent and end just before reaching Africa. So there will be two solar eclipses in 2020, which is June 21st. That's an annular solar eclipse. So another ring of fire will be seen over the Republic of Congo and Africa, as well as part of India and southern China. Another one will be on December 14th, 2020. There will be a total solar eclipse. To our viewers, once again, you are right now watching the live picture brought you by CGTN, and this is the live shot in Singapore. We just saw a ring of fire solar eclipse in Singapore. So we talk about the December's eclipse, or this ring of fire occur over Saudi Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia, will appear as a partial eclipse over Asia and Australia. The CGTN platform, Facebook, I saw our viewers from Uganda, from Philippines, from Cambodia. Hello to all. I believe you can see this. And that's also visible from the different continents, especially in a part of Asia. And I saw our viewers seeing the sun without any glass. That's not so recommended. So still, we suggest our viewers do not look directly at the sun. Hello to all from Philippines and Malaysia, Pakistan. You are all visible because we're all along the visible path of this 2019 Ring of Fire annular eclipse. So right now you look at this is the live picture from Singapore. So if our viewers, you miss our live picture of the Ring of Fire eclipse, I really suggest you later on play back to really observe by yourself once again that spectacular scene. You cannot miss it. And we also would like to make that as a Christmas gift to all our viewers. So to all our viewers right now, you are looking, this is a live shot from Singapore. So once again, if you observe the eclipse in person, be sure to wear proper eye protection like eclipse glasses. But the normal sunglasses, even with UV protection, is not enough. And we talk about today the annular parts covering the cities and the countries like Saudi Arabia, India, Sri Lanka, Singapore, Indonesia, Malaysia, Philippines, and Guam. So once again, this December eclipse will be a ring of fire occur over Saudi Arabia, India, and Southeast Asia, and it will appear as a partial eclipse over Asia and Australia. You are right now watching, this is the live picture from Singapore. And this is the third solar eclipse in 2019, and the first one on January 6, 2019, and the second one on July 2nd, 2019. Looking forward for year 2020, there are also two solar eclipses. One is the annular solar eclipse of June 21st, 2020, and another one is total solar eclipse of December 14th, 2020. December 26th solar eclipse. So this is an annular solar eclipse in which the moon does not completely cover the sun as it transits across the star's face. From the Earth where the eclipse is visible, this leaves a brilliant ring of light around the moon in which observers call a ring of fire. So today's annular solar eclipse began at 9:23 p.m. EST or 0223 December 26 GMT and will be ended in Guam at around 3:05 a.m. EST or 08:05 GMT. To all the viewers with CGTN New Media, we would like to make this only annual Ring of Fire solar eclipse in 2019 as a Christmas gift to all of you and wish you all happy holidays. Please enjoy this spectacular scene, either in person or still with CGTN New Media.